Hey, Try Life On family, welcome back to another edition of the Try Life On podcast. This is your host, Maurice Philogene. Today is Tuesday, April the 16th, 2024, 4 p.m., New York, Washington, D.C., East Coast time, wherever you are. I hope you are having a lovely day. I certainly had a lovely day because today I got the opportunity to speak to Valerie Bowden. Now, I have some notes here, so I'm going to be looking down if you're watching on the video version because there is a lot to talk about with Valerie. She is a sister from another mister of my own heart. She's very much a traveler, and that's why she caught my attention. Her spirit to live, her spirit to try life on, and her spirit to take a left when the crowd is going right. That is Valerie Bowden in a few sentences. When she was in her mid-20s, she did a cross-continental walking, backpacking trip from Cape Town, South Africa, all the way to the north of the continent, all the way up to Cairo, Egypt. That's a beautiful thing. She traversed 13 countries. And for her, it was because she had a notion to explore the continent after doing some volunteer work in Ethiopia. She wanted to see what life was about. She wanted to see how life felt. She wanted to see what else she could learn about the continent, the country, and the people. But that led her on this journey. And that's why I like these kinds of stories where that original trip led her on this journey of living in Ethiopia for 8 years, working on the outsourcing industry. So when you think about outsourcing, most times we think of India, the Philippines, but there is an enormous amount of talent on the continent of Africa. Valerie picked up on it, worked in the outsourcing space, which she talks about in the conversation, but started her own company after called Cradle. And here's the thing. Many times when we talk about trying life on, some people say you have to burn the boats. You need to go be an entrepreneur. You need to start something fresh. Just leave everything you're doing. I disagree. I disagree in my case. My journey was staying at the same company while leveraging those skills and building businesses on the outside of those companies. Valerie's very similar in that she took the skills from the company she was working at, decided to leave, open up her own company, leveraging those skills. And now she runs Cradle, an outsourcing firm that connects solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small companies with amazing talent in Africa to handle particular activities for a company that can easily be outsourced. So think everything from customer service to virtual assistants to data clerks or what have you. I love that. Now, there's two aspects relative to Try Life On with my friend Valerie. One, exploring the world. I am a massive advocate of travel. It builds empathy into you. It builds an understanding of how the world operates outside of where you are. I love my United States. There's no greater country in the world in terms of opportunity from my perspective. But this world has so much to offer. And me as a global citizen, having been to 98 countries over 350 times, I know that very well. So I like the fact that she has leaned into that nature of life, exploring what is out there. But the second part of trying life on for her, or that thread in the conversation, was the fact she took the skills from her employment, built a business, and not only is she working in a virtual capacity that allows her and her family to live as they want, as they intend, but she's also providing meaningful employment to so many people on the African continent and improving even our own American economy because she's connecting those employees to people who are here. Valerie, to me, is the epitome of what is possible when you do not follow the status quo. She is the epitome of if you change the prefix of your sentence from if only to what if I did start a business? What if I did go live in this country for 8 years? What if I did return home to the United States with my new husband and start a new family? She gets it. She knows how to try life on. I think she is a wonderful example of the art of the possible. And I'm glad a common friend connected us. I am a traveler too. I'm an entrepreneur and solopreneur as well. So it's just great to see these stories. And there's no one way to attack trying life on. So we need examples like this. And I think you will benefit tremendously. Okay. If you continue to receive value from my podcast, and I think a lot of you are, and I'm so appreciative you spend time with me on the podcast, I would ask you to consider giving it a 5-star rating on Apple iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast content. I continue to try to get principles, stories, examples, goodness, mistakes, everything, so folks can try life on, and I'd like to reach some more people, so help a brother out. But for now, sit back, relax, listen to this conversation with my girl, Valerie. I hope you enjoy it. Valerie, hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good.
Good, good. I'm just playing. Listen, I'm smiling because you and I were just in the green room, if you will, and we were talking about status quo path of things and our journeys and things of that nature. When I ran into you, or when I was introduced to you, and I figured out that you traversed the continent of Africa with a backpack, which is not no, that's uncommon, but backpacking is not uncommon. But what was uncommon is that uncommon for most people, but very similar to you and I, you ended up coming back. I think you went to grad school back in the US and you ended up coming all the way back to Ethiopia and living there for 8 years. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
What happened? Why did that happen?
Wow. Okay, that's a long question.
Welcome
It's a
to the
long
Try Life On
answer.
podcast.
So it goes back to I did 3 months after college volunteering in Ethiopia. And
Yeah.
as soon as I arrived, I realized that the volunteering was a horrible idea, caused social damage, was not helping. I mean, it's an example of how volunteerism has a lot of negative side effects that we don't realize,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
realized that, but I was like, whoa, Ethiopia is like so different. It's
Hmm.
not what I pictured as an American. Like best coffee on earth, best food, great people, super nice. I loved it.
Hmm.
So I went back to the US and I got my master's and I worked for a job, like a 9 to 5 for 1 year. And I was totally miserable. Like
Hmm.
just, I was like, I shouldn't hate life this much when I'm 25. Like this
Yep.
cannot be life, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I was like, I have to go back to Ethiopia because I just can't stop thinking of it. But what are other African countries like? Like, are they as cool and amazing as Ethiopia is?
Hmm.
And that's when the idea for a backpacking trip kind of popped into my head. So
Oh,
that's
Ethiopia was first.
Ethiopia was first. And then I did the backpacking trip for 7 months. And then I got a job offer after my backpacking trip to
Yeah.
move to Ethiopia for 6 months. So I promised my mom and dad,
Oh, I
I'll be
see.
back in 6 months.
Right.
8 years later, I come back with like a husband, a baby,
Fair enough.
and now I've been back in the US for 2 years since then.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
But the original, I got you. The original trip was where did you start and where did you finish?
I did. So I did the Cape to Cairo route. So I started in South Africa and I
Yeah.
went all the way to until I got to Cairo, like so like the entire top of the continent. And I
Oh,
did
you
the
went to the
13,
top. You went the
yeah,
full length.
full length. Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So I did 13 countries
Yeah.
the whole time.
I lived in I lived in East Africa for a year.
Where?
I was based in, so I was military. I was based in Djibouti. But what I didn't, so I was a federal agent in the military. So I was just plain clothes. I never wore a uniform, anything. And I was,
Mhm.
while most uniform military members have to remain on Camp Lemonnier, which is the base out there, I didn't. I was just in the normal community and all that type of stuff. But I
Cool.
spent time in Djibouti, coastal Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Eritrea.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I
That's
know it
so
well.
cool.
I know it
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Those, I mean, I've been to all of those places except for Djibouti and Eritrea were on my list. I just never got to them
You never got to them, yeah.
when I was in Ethiopia, but I would love to see them.
Did
Heard great
you
things.
did you have any challenge? Well, I'm sure you had challenges, but did you have any security related challenges traversing the continent like that?
No, I
Not at
felt
all.
so much safer in African countries than I did in the US.
Yeah.
So I would hitchhike, which I would never do in America.
Yeah.
I got lost all the time. Everybody helped me. I mean, like my stories are like, I think people expect me to say like scary, traumatizing stories, but it's all
Yeah.
like, I got lost. Someone helped me.
Yeah.
Somebody gave me a meal. I stayed at someone's house. Like every story is just kindness.
That's because people don't understand Africa. It's very listen, and I said I lived there a year, and I can tell you I still don't understand it because
Mhm.
one, it's so big. I don't People don't realize the size of that continent.
Right. It's
Two,
huge.
I was watching you in an interview and you talked about, look, if you're in the US and you go up to Canada, it can kind of feel the same unless you're in Eastern Canada, which might be French speaking or something like that. But if you go to Mexico, it's a totally different culture. Well, everywhere in Africa is a different culture.
Yeah.
you cross a border and it's totally different. So people just can't feel it. How do you describe it to people? People say Africa, they think one thing. So how do you describe it and the experience?
Yeah, I mean, Africa is it's like a convenient word to say, but you're right. Like
Yeah.
every country is so different. So when I was backpacking, you cross the border and then the language is different, religion is different, the culture, the history, the people, the food, like everything changes dramatically.
Yep.
So yeah, it's super different. So I could talk a lot more about like Ethiopia because I lived there for 8 years, but it's
Yeah.
yeah, the history and everything is so diverse and so different in each country that yeah, it's hard for us to understand as an American. And I think also in the US, we only hear like the bad things. And when you're
Hmm.
actually on the continent, you start to see like all the cool and amazing and like all the kind stories that like just don't really get out past the media.
And it never will. It
Yeah.
never will because there's a narrative out there that plays, not just Africa, everywhere in the world. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and there's such this narrative, but I love going there. I enjoy it. So when you did that and you ended up spending time in Ethiopia and getting a job offer, my assumption is, and I say it all the time, there's things that our soul is pushing us to do to try life on. But even though they may have good intentions, our family, our peers, our neighbors, our coworkers kind of, in a way, project their fears onto us. Hey, I don't think you should do that for this reason or what have you. Can you talk about just the mindset of taking the chance on yourself and, going for that employment in Ethiopia? Because I'm sure as we're speaking, there's tons of people who want to do something similar, but are just scared to take that jump.
Yeah, exactly. Good question. So
Yeah.
I grew up in like a small town in Indiana. So, people from
Mhm.
the Midwest aren't known for traveling. And I grew up in a really faith-based community. So when I left, everybody was getting married and having babies. And I would say probably nobody was super supportive of my backpacking trip or moving. People thought it was crazy. It was like Taken had just coming out. So everyone just
Oh
assumed
boy.
I'd be like kidnapped. It was
Yeah.
referenced a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've learned if I really listen deep down to what I feel led to, like if I put away all the fear and all the worry and I just go with what makes me feel alive and like that little voice deep inside you that tells you no, like it'd be so awesome to
Yeah.
explore, to go somewhere. I followed that. And now looking back,
Mm.
that backpacking trip jump started everything. It started my career. Living in Ethiopia has helped me in so many ways. It's also how I met my husband. Like I can't even count all the ways that have actually paid off or how I've benefited from following that, that just small
I do.
desire to really go after my dream.
Yep.
But when I see people I went to high school with who did the safe thing and took the safe routes, so miserable now. Like
Yeah.
it's really sad. It's really sad to see. But yeah, I mean, I think traveling Africa was the safest thing I did. Like following your heart is always going to be the safest thing that you do.
I agree. And when I fall in love with something, or when my heart, or let's say my gut, which I'm faith based as well. So you can call it the universe, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it Tom and Jerry if you want to, but whatever that thing is, everybody's so different. Whatever that thing is, I encourage people to listen to it. I honestly believe when you have that gut feeling that you're supposed to be doing something, that is life screaming at you to come live, right?
Yeah.
For me, a couple of examples was when I became a police officer at age 33. I just needed to do it before before it was too late, but I just needed to do it in my lifetime. Similar to you, maybe not the voluntourism aspect of it, but I was stationed in Turkey running a field office for my federal law enforcement agency. So Syrian immigrants would come across all the time. And I met so many that I got really interested in how it was affecting families and could I do something. So I found, like in Greece, there were the refugee camps,
Right.
and they needed English teachers. So I volunteered and I went. And it wasn't a voluntourism thing. I had to pay my own way, not to them, just me. I had to get there. And I spent 8 weeks at that refugee camp just teaching English.
Cool.
I think I helped, but I actually think they helped me more, right? I became kind of a better citizen of the world to see what people were going through. But that region grabbed me so much, Turkey, Greece, the Eastern Mediterranean. I've been back now since 2015, maybe 90 times.
I
that kind of
no,
thing.
I believe that. And yeah,
Yeah.
first of all, not all volunteering is bad. I think the
Yeah,
one
yeah,
that I did was bad. I think a lot of the ones in Africa tend to be a little bit worse,
yeah,
some of them. But yeah, I would say the same. Like I think people gravitate towards different areas. So mine's always been like as soon as I did my first trip to Africa, I wanted to go back. And now the travel spots that always make me feel most happy or most alive in are somewhere on the continent.
yeah,
But I have friends who feel the same about like maybe South America or just different parts of the world. So it's cool when you find that spot.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
go
it
back.
it grabs you. It grabs you,
Yeah.
and you can learn so much from it. So you spent a lot of time in Ethiopia. Now I want kind of pivot to the entrepreneur in you. And I don't know if you were one when you got there, but you somehow, this is how I know your story. You somehow landed on outsourcing of sorts
Mhm.
and the amazing talent that is the African continent and all the individual countries that are there. Can you talk to that a bit and just what happened that shifted you into that entrepreneurial mindset?
Right. So I would say I was never an entrepreneur. Like, you know how sometimes you hear those stories about entrepreneurs where like, I did a lemonade stand when I was little.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing. There were
Nothing.
no
That
warning
ain't you.
signs.
Yeah.
I actually did social work. So part of the reason why I went to Ethiopia in the first place was to work with like a nonprofit. And then even though I was like backpacking during my trip and doing all these kind of cool things, I was stopping at nonprofits and charities and tech hubs. And after seeing the continent, I was like, you know what really works? It's just jobs, like just
Just
good
jobs,
business where
getting
you're
people
paying
jobs.
ethical wages. That's like the sustainable way out of poverty, right?
Yeah.
And so when I moved to Ethiopia, I got involved with businesses. So in the
Mhm.
beginning, it was a lot of like exporting. So like exporting Ethiopian coffee to the US. And I was kind of like matchmaking and
Mm.
connecting. And I loved the business side of it. And then right before COVID hit, I started working for a US outsourcing firm. Like I just kind of randomly got into it.
Okay.
And that was when it really became so exciting for me because like overnight you would get a request from a US business to hire like 20 people or 100 people.
But
And
is
things
this
are just
through the firm you were working for or
that was
through
for the previous firm.
for the
Yeah.
previous firm? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was
Yep.
working for another company. So I learned a lot and I saw just like the benefits that outsourcing can have. But
Yep.
I had kind of two things I never felt great about. And that was one, like people don't get paid a lot. Like these Fortune 500 companies that are hiring in Africa pay so bad. Like a lot of them are paying like 50 cents an hour or something, where
Wow.
it's just like, still, I mean, still creating a job for someone who didn't have income before, but still kind of like it doesn't feel good. It's still they're still having to like side hustle and do all these kind of things to make money. So I didn't like that. And I didn't like that most of these Fortune 500 companies, like they hide the fact that they're hiring from Africa. So you're under all these NDAs not to let it leak that they have teams based in Ethiopia. And I
Why?
think
Why would they why do
I
they care?
I don't know. I think some of it's like I think outsourcing kind of has a bad reputation. Sometimes it's done in a way that I don't I think it's not done correctly or maybe the communication isn't good or I think a
Yeah.
lot of these
Yeah.
companies are just kind of hiding that they're doing it. They're not promoting it.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to do the opposite. So when
Mhm.
we moved to the US 2 years ago, a month
Mhm.
before I gave birth, I was like, I quit. I'm creating my own company. So still kind of outsourcing in Africa,
Mhm.
but we pay better and we also promote the fact that we're hiring from Africa and we try to make that cool. Like we want people to feel really excited about hiring from
But I
Africa.
want to highlight something that I think is a great lesson. You embraced what you were learning from from that outsourcing company that you were working for. You learned the skills, you absorbed it, and then you decided to take a leap of faith with those skills and
Mhm.
create something on your own based on that.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I mean, it's such a good model. I am an entrepreneur, although I did work for 25 years for the same company, but I was always building businesses and doing things on the outside. I thought the company that I work for is called Accenture. And people think when I talk about corporate or the status quo or the 9 to 5 that I'm actually shitting on Accenture, and I'm not. I'm actually saying that it's our approach to it that's messed up. The fact that they pay us a wage to go do certain things, I think is good. It's on us to take those skills that we learn and apply them to something intentionally and create something. And you created something. I think a lot of people who want to jump out are not recognizing that they're getting so many resources from the place where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I learned so much. It was a good experience. And I know, I left feeling really good. Like I know I had like contributed. It was like we parted ways on really good, good terms. But when I started my own business, I knew more what to do because I had that previous experience. And
Yeah,
then about
yeah.
6 months after working, I realized there's some gaps. There were some things that weren't working well in our business. And it's like,
Mhm,
oh, because I'm still doing the same methods I learned at that other company. And
mm,
now that I kind of had the foundation, I was able to change things up and make it more and more to like what I wanted and what aligned with me and what was better for our clients. So I've kind of
mhm,
taken it and now I do
mhm.
so many things differently. But in the beginning, when I started my business, I really relied on some of the same models and guiding principles I was used to doing.
Yeah, so a lot of people would have, yep, you relying on the old models and at least to get started,
To
but
get
you had
started.
this seed of an idea. So how do you take the leap of faith? I don't I don't think there's going to be a structured way per se. I just do stuff and course correct as I go. But
Yeah.
you had this idea for a business, you quit and were like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Then what? How did you know what to do next? How do I start the business? How do I set up this company? How do I do this? I think that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Mhm. I think it's I think everything I've learned is you don't know it all right away. So you just do one thing, you just Google how to do something, you do it, and then 3 months later you realize that was a bad idea and then you have to fix it. Like,
Yeah.
I think people are so afraid of doing it perfectly that they don't get started. Where
Hmm.
I'm more just like a as long as it's not gonna kill me, bankrupt me, or land me in jail, like I just go for it. And then I know I'm gonna fix it and edit it along the way. And then I get things done so much faster. In the end, I'm still way ahead because I started.
Yeah, I love that. I try to study a lot of successful people to put principles out there and stuff like that. And by far, one of the most common things I see in successful people, and success is not just money. I'm just going to state that. But by
Agree.
far, what I see in successful people is their ability to just do, just go. I have enough information. I'm just going to figure this out as I go, and they don't overthink it. And there's
Exactly.
just it sounds like you were squarely in that realm too.
I think
Um,
one other thing that's always been
yeah,
comforting to me is when you hear, um, like Amy Schumer talks a lot about how the first 2 years of doing stand up, she was horrible, but
yeah,
now she's like one of the most recognized comedians. And I just
yeah,
heard an interview with like Ed Sheeran where he said like the first 4 years he was horrible, and he even played like a song he first put out, and it was
yeah.
bad. And so it's like giving yourself permission for the next 2 years. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make so many mistakes, and I'm going to suck a little bit, but I'm not going to quit, and then eventually you're gonna become good. And that's always been
Yeah.
comforting to
And
me.
I believe that you can only incrementally get better. I've also come to the understanding that nobody cares. And let me I'll qual and I see you're agreeing with me, but I want to qualify that for people who are listening. It's not that people don't care about what you're doing, especially if they're a direct customer or if they impact you.
Mhm.
It says that everybody's trying to figure something out. Everyone. And in fact, when I see people trying to figure something out and fail, that tells me that they have the gumption to go figure something out. You know what I
Agreed.
mean? And everybody's
Mhm.
so worried about being perfect and looking good and getting it right. And like nobody cares. Just try not to lose money, but nobody cares. Just
Right.
keep going. Just keep going. So can you talk about Cradle a bit and what you are doing? And frankly, I need to hear because I have needs that I think Cradle can cover. But let's talk about
Yeah.
Cradle a little bit.
So I launched Cradle because Africa is the cradle of humanity. So that's kind of where the name comes from.
Yeah.
And what we do is we connect US businesses or businesses around the world with really awesome African professionals.
Hmm.
So mainly what we're doing is cold calling, appointment setting, customer service reps, and sometimes some virtual assistants.
Hmm.
And they plug into like US companies, and yeah, they're just increasing sales and revenue and being like a huge support for the clients that they work with.
So, but how are you sourcing these amazing people? And to be on the business side, how do you know that folks that far away have the requisite skill set? Like, how do you screen that, right?
Mhm.
How do you know they have the requisite skill set to support whatever entity wants to pick them up?
Yeah, great question. So when I first started, a lot of the people we hired were people I knew personally, like just spending
Okay.
8 years. It was like friends, neighbors, everybody was
Yeah, people,
messaging
yeah,
me.
yeah, relationships.
And then I have like our COO and our talent coordinator and our recruiter are all based in Ethiopia. So we have like a huge kind of like in like on the ground presence that helps.
Mhm.
But then eventually we outgrew all of our personal connections. And so now a lot of the people who work for us, like our current employees, it's like their wife wants to work for us now, or their brother or their sister or their best friend. So we get a lot of referrals, and it's really nice because you can trust it a little bit more because people are like vouching for the people that they're
Yep.
referring.
Yep.
Um, and then, I mean, for cold calling, appointment setting, a lot of it's like also the English accent. So a lot of the US clients really want that like perfect accent. So we screen for that. And then everybody we hire has had previous experience working for a US company. So a lot of them have worked.
Oh, they have some level of business acumen already.
Yeah, because we found like our clients, one thing they've said is like, we don't want to train people to do the job. Like we want people who are really good. And also cold calling is super rough. So you can
It
tell
is
someone
tough.
about the
Yeah.
job, but unless you've done it, you don't know if you have the stamina to really stick with it. So everybody we hire has had previous experience, and that's kind of a prereq that we rarely ever break.
Um,
So yeah.
I think that's awesome. I have my own unconscious bias, right?
Okay,
My family's from Haiti, yeah. So
cool.
we're African roots, but through Haiti. When I call, let's just say when I call a bank or an airline or something, and someone picks up from a call center in the Philippines or anywhere, I'm very patient because that's what you become when you travel the world. You know that people are
Same.
different, and yeah, it's just like I didn't quite get that. Can you repeat that? But sometimes people can have very heavy accents, which can make the process of, let's say, customer service or something like that elongated, where you know how the American and maybe North American Western culture is, where people want to get shit done fast. It's just
Right.
true. What happened? Is that a known thing? Is that a talked about thing in the industry? And how do you don't want to, it's not, discriminate's not the word, but I understand both sides of the coin, because
Hmm.
you do have a business to run and communication does matter, but having an accent is human. So how do you deal with that in your business?
Yes, I understand what you're saying again, because I understand both sides.
Yeah,
And like my husband has an accent,
yeah,
and so I get it like that. I think it's important to be able to communicate with customers. So I think it makes sense for a US company to want good accents, and it does make the job I think better when someone has a better accent because they're
better
able to
accent.
kind
I'm
of
with you.
communicate,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I think there's just some of it that it makes sense. Like if you're cold calling, your accent needs to match the market that you're calling. I think that just kind of is a business principle. For some people who are just really awesome and they have a small accent, that's when we'll place them with as like a virtual assistant or in a back end job where the accent isn't as critical. So we can still
Mm.
hire them. They're still really amazing. But they might not be fit for some of the roles.
Certain platforms they might not be
Yeah.
a fit for. I totally get that. So what are the, let's just say a small business like me, like a solopreneur who, entrepreneur, solopreneur, who wants to hire a virtual assistant or some kind of customer service support or something like that. What would be the, and if, uh, I don't know if you can price one or whatever. I mean, I've priced VAs out of the Philippines and used them from time to time. What
Yeah.
is that like in Africa?
Yeah, I mean, so everybody's different, but what we do well is those kind of tasks that are just like repetitive and you just need someone to kind of do it and you can teach someone how to do it. Those are the tasks that we do best. I
Yeah.
think a lot of it comes down to having just like a really good job description and
Yep.
really good feedback as well. I think the problem that we see some clients do is they just want to send like a Loom video and just send a Loom video, be done. But
And they can figure it out from there. That kind
yeah,
of thing.
I always find that the clients who do the best and get the best results are the ones that are willing to do like a 5-minute stand up every single day or give feedback or
Mm.
really invest in the first couple months and see it as like a ramp up period. Because once you've really trained someone, even though they have previous experience, they don't know you exactly. They don't know your clients as well. So the more you can share that kind of information, I think the better results you end up getting.
That's awesome. Valerie, I have that wish now. My wish for myself, where I am in my journey, is I'm out of the regular work world, W-2 world. If you, I still work hard, but I'm out of that world. And I only do business where I don't have a need for customers or employees, or because I want to be mobile.
Right.
Like I want this laptop, I want my cell phone, I want to be able to get on a plane and bounce. That's just my lifestyle. But I've come to understand that I also want support, not only from a business perspective, but even from a personal life perspective. Because now I'm at the age where I'm starting to pay attention to my parents and stuff like that. Yeah. So I could I was talking to coaching students about this. We could get VA support, or just someone who's now a team member for you from a life perspective. If you're an entrepreneur and you can afford whatever the rate is, to take on the task of helping you organize your life, kind of thing. I'm wondering if any of the folks, if you have seen that it's not only from a business perspective but also from a life perspective.
Definitely. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
that's
if
where
you
I'm
talk
at.
so much about like time, it's not just like money freedom, right? It's time
Yeah.
freedom. So when you are hiring a VA and giving them 10 hours a week of work, that's 10 extra hours you have to go hang out with your kids, or they can handle customer emails while you're on a plane to Cyprus, or whatever you're
Yep.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and I always say, like, it should feel like you should be really happy when you're working with a VA. Like, I recently offloaded one task to a VA that we have.
Mhm.
I just increased her hours, and I was like skipping around the house. Like, I was like, I don't have to do payroll anymore. That's something
Yeah.
I can offload. And I was so, so happy. So you should feel that way when you're having a VA.
I know that intrinsically. The I'm asking about the personal life stuff because I want people to hear me say, because I talk a lot about the fact that my building phase of my entrepreneurial journey is done. I
Mhm.
have done so much in the last 27 years. Quattro Capital is the firm that I run with partners now, and we have like over $200 million in real estate that we manage, and about
Mhm.
100 million of investor money. I don't feel the need to do anything else. I actually, and it doesn't need to be that level. I think anyone who builds something entrepreneurially, if you have enough to live, one of the things that faith wants us to do is to live, to just
Mhm.
go plug into the planet, go to Ethiopia, go to Turkey, go see the cousin you haven't seen in a long time. I'm actually kind of taking it seriously with like getting support for someone to help me organize my personal life so I can go live more,
Mhm.
especially when we're parents of little kids. It gets even more complicated. Um,
Exactly.
but one of the rudimentary examples I want to give, I just moved into a new house. I had furniture delivered. The final six chairs of the dining room table arrived yesterday, and I was like, no way, I'm not putting anything else together. I don't want to. So I paid the service. That's like
Right.
a hundred bucks, $110 to come. And while the gentleman was putting the chairs together, I had two calls with investors, and one investor invested $100,000 into something that we're doing. My time
Amazing.
was better spent in what I call dark green time, which is the moneymaker time or the impact time to someone that I'm doing business with, where I get to bless that person. It was $100, and then I tipped him like $60. But he put these chairs together, and I went back and I looked. I'm like, no, chairs are done. I use my time wisely. I'm happier
Mhm.
today. That is the purpose of money. But we're so tight with it sometimes when we can afford it, yet we don't realize that time is more valuable than the paper.
Exactly. I get that on so many levels. We bought a fixer upper last year, thinking like
Yeah.
we're gonna save money, whatever. It has cost so much time for me to be redoing this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I could just be using that time to do sales work or really anything, because I actually realized I have no skills for fixing up a house. Like I don't know how to put things together. It's so obvious when you walk into our house what I've done. And so now
Yeah.
I've been hiring contractors. I'm happy. I'm
Yeah.
not cursing because I don't have to like put anything together.
Yeah.
And I'm using that time for things that only I can do. And it pays off.
I love
So
that. I love
yeah.
that. How does owning and running your own business, which I assume is remote,
Mhm.
primarily remote, right?
Yeah.
How does you running and owning your own business, remote, which is even better, impact your lifestyle positively or negatively versus, being in the office for the previous company that you were working for or something like that? Just from a lifestyle perspective, how does it manifest for you?
I love it. I mean, as a mom,
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of can do best of both worlds, where I can see my kids more. We can have lunch. I can have lunch with my husband every day because he also works remote. But I still get to run my business, and so I'm a huge fan of remote work. In fact, that's another thing we do is that
Mm.
all of our team members also work remote. So that's a huge reason why companies or why talent will leave, a Fortune 500 company and come work for Cradle, is because we pay them significantly better and we allow them to work from home because we believe in the remote lifestyle so much.
I love it.
Yeah.
I espouse In the Tri-Life Fund mantra, I espouse assets. I don't know whether it's stocks, bonds, real estate, self-education. I don't care what it is, but I think we should invest in ourselves. And then secondarily to that, I think you can have a great lifestyle with virtual income. There is benefit to being in an office. There is, and there's synergies that come from being in an office. But it comes down to who you are as a person and what you want out of life. And a lot of people just want to be mobile or have the sense of being mobile, and virtual work can really do that for them. Not only are you experiencing it, meaning you, the person, but you're giving it to all these other people around the world, which is why I was so enthralled with what you do with Cradle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I love it. I feel like remote work for me, it's again, as a traveler at heart,
Yeah.
I can do the same job tomorrow if I were to travel, and I love that. Now my husband is also working remote, and
Yeah.
he's Ethiopian, so he's a little
Yeah.
bit more used to like community and people around, which is a little bit harder to find in the US. And now he's working
Yes, it
remote as
is.
well.
Yeah.
So he
Oh,
has to like
yeah. There's
go,
downsides to it. Yeah.
yeah, so he's had to like go out of his way to like join a gym. He joins Toastmasters. Like he has to like really seek out social activities to kind of balance it out for him.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, so I think if you're that kind of personality, you're working remote, you still have to find ways for like socially,
I
how to
get
get
it.
out there and see people. But for
Yeah.
me, I like it.
Just out of curiosity, you came back to Pittsburgh. Did you not want to stay in Ethiopia, or there was more family, or?
Yeah, no, we loved it. When we started having kids, I
Yeah.
wanted to be a little bit closer to my family.
Yeah.
And then also for my husband, he had an Ethiopian passport, which is impossible to travel with. So
Yeah. Oh,
we would
yes, yes,
try,
yes, yes,
we would
yes, yes.
try to go to Europe for my sister's wedding, and he couldn't get the visa. We tried to come to the US so he could meet my grandma before we got married. He got turned down. So we kind of just realized like as a family we need to all have the same passport, so he's
Yeah.
here until he gets the passport, and then maybe we'll go back. I don't know, I really loved living in Ethiopia, so I wouldn't put that past me.
I loved Ethiopia. For the reasons that you just articulated relative to community, it's one of the reasons why I spend so much time in Lebanon, spend so much time in Turkey. I think we look at community a little bit different. Although I do think the family unit is really strong in the Midwest of the country versus, like, no, I don't want to say East Coast because then people will be like, we're just so busy. I think we've lost the family aspect a bit here.
I would say one thing I really liked in Ethiopia was the community, like just
Yeah,
if you're in trouble, you really do know that you have neighbors and family right beside you that will drop everything to help you. And then in terms of raising a kid, it was actually great because we had so many cousins and neighbors who could help take care and babysit my son when I was working. It
that's
like
it.
mom guilt doesn't seem to be a thing there. Like it's just like because there's so much support for moms,
It's a village. It's a village raising
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, I think raising kids there is easier and better than in the US. It's like everything comes down to me. One of my Ethiopian friends said like
Mm,
marriage in America is 80% chores. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what,
95.
yeah. Whereas in Ethiopia, it wasn't like that at all. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of things like the US I think can learn from other cultures. And I think that's one of the great things about traveling is you can like pick up those things and like, do them when you come back home.
Yeah. And you and I can espouse other countries and be a bit of a advocate for that. And it's not even that I love the US. I'm so
Mhm.
grateful for all the opportunity it gave me and my parents and all that. Uh, but we can learn so much from other people. We were talking about kids real quick, just as we wrap up. Um, my oldest has been to 17 countries now.
Oh,
My youngest at 11 has been to 10 countries, and we're on our way to our
amazing.
11th in a month or two. I need these boys to see the world and understand that it has a lot to offer. And there are
Hmm.
people out there, and both of them understand, there are people out there who don't chase money the way it has been presented to them in this society. Like,
Right.
Dad, I got to get all this money so I can be free. And I'm like, actually, no, you don't. And freedom comes from internal first. You might need a few thousand based on where we live, but there's people around the world who make a few hundred a week or a few
Hmm.
thousand in a month, and they're living free, or $2, and you know this, or make $2, but they're happy.
Yeah.
I sensed that the first time I was 23 and I was spending a lot of time in Brazil, and everybody would go to work, and on the weekends they would go and do churrasco, which is just a barbecue with the family.
Uh-huh.
And it was people going to work to get to the churrasco. I
Yes.
loved it. I
Yes.
loved it. I could feel it. We can advocate that for our kids and our friends and our family.
I think that's amazing. I think for me, another thing that travel has done is like the kind of person you have to be to go to a country where they don't speak your language, they
Yeah.
have a different religion, you have to navigate public transport, you know, and you can't read any of the signs. The kind of person that makes you, you are so much more calm, so much more open. You know, like if somebody in Pittsburgh needs directions and they don't speak English, like I'm the best person to help them because so many people have done that to me. You know, like it
Yeah.
makes you a
Yeah.
better person to people in your own
Totally.
country, and it makes you a better traveler. I mean, everything about it's beautiful.
It does. It does. Everything about your journey is beautiful. I love what you do.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to end up being a customer. We'll talk offline in just a moment. Just as a parting thought, so we talked a lot about your journey, the fact that you leaped at the chance to be entrepreneurial. I even want to throw in there the fact that you spent time in a formal company to gain skills which helped you to make that leap. Um, what would you, I mean, you've had a trek that is certainly not the average path from my perspective. There are people out there who want to do similar, but they are fearful, they are scared to jump, or they lack the courage, or whatever. What's one thing that you would tell someone who wants to live life differently, but is struggling to figure out how to try life on? What would be one thing you would want to suggest to them?
I think people should just take that first mini step because I think what people don't know is that before I went to Ethiopia by myself for 3 months, first
Yeah.
I did 3 weeks in Guatemala. Guatemala is where I got
Ah,
the travel bug, right? So that was like my first trip by myself was in Guatemala. That showed me like how cool it was to travel. So then going from 3 weeks to wanting to do a 3 month trip the next year was easy. And then from
hmm.
wanting to do a 3 month time in Ethiopia to a 7 month backpacking trip was not a big jump. And
Yep.
then a 7 month backpacking trip kind of spiraled into 8 years overseas,
Yep.
right? But I don't think if you would have asked me, you know, 10, 12 years ago, if I would just live in Ethiopia for 8 years, it'd be like, that would seem so scary, right? But it's
Yep.
just taking that small step led to the next one and to the next one. So even if your dream is super huge, just take like one tiny step and then one thing will lead to another and you'll get there. You don't have to do something so crazy, just,
I
but
love
something's
that.
better than nothing.
Something is better than nothing, and we only have this one lifetime to give it a shot. So we may as
Right.
well do it. And you did, and you've created something beautiful, including a family. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I know we have missed each other a couple times, but I'm honored to finally get to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. And where can people find you? Just to give people just a little bit of information about Cradle and you independently.
Yeah. So I live on LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
if you look at Valerie Bowden on LinkedIn, you can start to see I do lots of tips and insights there.
Okay.
Or our website is cradle.com and that's spelled without the A. So CRDLE.com.
CRDLE.com.
Mhm.
All right. Check her
Yeah.
out on LinkedIn, cradle.com without the A. Miss Bowden, thank you so much for
Thank
gracing the Try Life
you.
On podcast. We really
I
appreciate
love it.
you. Yeah. Have a good one. Hey guys, this is Maurice, host of the Try Life On podcast, and thank you for listening to another episode. I hope you are finding it useful in helping you design your own lifestyle that you don't need a vacation from. If that's the case, please consider dropping a review for me, whether in Apple, iTunes, or in Spotify. Drop a review, put some stars on it, give me some feedback on how I can make the podcast better, what information you are looking for. I am doing my best to get information to you on the Try Life On principles, the 5 freedoms, how to build lifestyle, travel hacking, all of it. And I want to do it for you. So please do a review for me. And until next time, my name is Maurice Philogene, and this is the Try Life On podcast. Peace.